Oh, what's the good word? Braden Baylor here this hour on CBS Sports HQ, presented by Verbo, and we're getting closer to 2023, but before that happens, we got CFP semifinals to take care of. Georgia looking to repeat, Ohio State seeking redemption in the Peach Bowl. As for Michigan, building on last year's run, while TCU is hoping to make this a standard in that Fiesta Bowl. Here's our Chip Patterson breaking it all down for you.
And then there were four teams who traveled very different journeys to get to the college football playoff for a shot at the national championship. In the Fiesta Bowl, it's the undefeated Michigan Wolverines against the upstart TCU Horned Frogs. And for Jim Harbaugh, it's not only a chance to win his first title as a head coach, but to bring one home to his alma mater for the first time in a quarter century.
We're excited for the challenge to advance and to see how we'll stack up in the playoffs.
For TCU, being the underdog is nothing new. In fact, it's something they embrace. And if you happen to be holding a ticket before the season kicked off of TCU winning it all, around 230 to 1. And make no mistake, the Horned Frogs are not here to take part, they're here to take over.
Our guys, they don't want anything given to them, they want to earn it.
In the Peach Bowl, the undefeated Georgia Bulldogs are steamrolling towards being the next dynasty in college football. Even after losing a record amount of talent to the NFL draft from last season's national championship team, they still boast a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense.
But it should be an electric matchup, electric atmosphere. It's really what college football is all about. These kids having an opportunity to play in a game like this.
As for their opponent, Ohio State will have to pick themselves off the mat after an embarrassing defeat to their arch rivals at the Shoe. It'll be the third playoff appearance in the past 4 seasons for Ryan Day and the Buckeyes, but they'll need to execute at a near-perfect level to knock off the reigning champions.
How we got here, at this point, I guess doesn't really matter. Now that we're here, it's time to go play.
As 2022 comes to a close, college football immortality awaits. Will the favorites move one step closer towards making history? Or is there perhaps an upset brewing? It's winning time on New Year's Eve.
Home field presented by Verbo, and for UGA, the ATL has been perceived as maybe a home edge for the Bulldogs. This is Georgia's second game in Mercedes-Benz Stadium this month, the first being, of course, that beatdown of LSU back on December 3rd to claim another SEC title. But when it comes to Kirby Smart and Ryan Day, the HCs in this one, they're expecting this to be a little physical from the start.
When you look across the board, you do studies on these semifinals and final playoff games since the playoffs started. Physicality at the line of scrimmage has been really critical. And you look across the board, teams that run the ball well tend to win these games. Also, red area third down and explosive plays are indicators. But the line of scrimmage play and physicality, but physicality can be a lot of different ways. It can be on the perimeter, it can be on special teams, it can be a lot of different venues, ways of looking at it. And I got a lot of respect for both conferences, because when you play in a bowl game, you get to watch the other conference all the way through. You get to see all these teams they play, and you have a lot of respect for the conference that you're playing. They have great physicality in that conference, always have, and we respect that.
This is going to be an unbelievable environment and electric atmosphere, and playing a Mercedes-Benz, and again, playing in the CFP. It's going to be that type of atmosphere. Our guys know that and understand that, and that's what you're going to get in a game like this. So our guys have been practicing that way and preparing that way so that we can play our best football. But we know that that's the type of game it's going to be.
And joining us from Hotlanta, the duo Josh Pate and Bryant McFadden there ahead of the Peach Bowl. And Josh, I'll start with you, because we just heard from both coaches there. Ohio State, if you want a shot at the title, it runs through Georgia. We know that. Before the Bulldogs, they had a different message yesterday. They feel like more of the hunter as opposed to the hunted. A different team, but the same goals a year ago. Kind of set the scene for us here.
It's probably unlike any I've been around. Normally, BMAC, when we come into a playoff setting, both fan bases are fully engaged, and usually, unless you've got like a 2-touchdown spread, both fan bases genuinely think they're about to win the game. Georgia absolutely feels that way. It's the weirdest thing right now, interacting with Ohio State fans here on the streets, in the hotel lobby. it's the inverse of what it normally is. Normally, it's them telling you they're about to win, and maybe you doubt it. I'm sitting here trying to convince Ohio State fans they're going to win because they're so subdued right now, at least the ones I've encountered, because of that setback, that big setback for the second year in a row against Michigan. So the hype's there. It's just disproportionately to one side. But I just think back to the SEC title game last year. That's kind of what it felt like with Georgia-Bama round one. Didn't matter. Bama beat Georgia soundly. So it's not like that matters come kickoff, but we're setting the scene here. The scene is sort of surreal.
No question. It's surreal in favor of UGA because this has been their home away from home when you look at the number of ball games they've been able to play in the stadium right behind us. So they're overly confident, deserving so. They've been the most consistent team. They've been the best team in college football from start to finish. And when you transition to Ohio State in regards to their fans not being as optimistic, it's all about Michigan. It's all about what happened in that Michigan ball game. Losing is one thing, but to lose in the fashion in which they lost, that's a whole nother thing. But they have to realize and remember what happened in late November is gone. That's in the past. You have an opportunity to correct your wrongs against one of the best teams in college football on an even playing field. Even though this is in Atlanta, it's a neutral site for Ohio State. So they got to go out and play relaxed football because technically there's no pressure because no one really believes they have a shot.
Buckeyes definitely looking for redemption, as you mentioned there. Josh, I'm curious. Look, there's plenty of matchups across the board here on Saturday. Give me a few that's catching your eye and that can actually be the deciding factor in this game.
Really interested to see how effective Georgia's pass rush is. That doesn't always mean bringing extra guys. That doesn't always even mean off the edge. But when you talk to coaches, it's a little bit different when they describe the matchup here than maybe what you see on TV or what you and your buddies are talking about at the water cooler. There are a lot of coaches in the SEC that think if you can give your quarterback time, there's some plays to be made against that Georgia secondary. Now, there's a great big caveat there because most people hadn't had time. Either that, BMAC, or they haven't had the passing game to take advantage of it. But I keep going back to that SEC championship game last year because that Georgia team, just like this one this year, they built a wall at the line of scrimmage. You couldn't run it on them. Bama didn't run it all that great last year. In fact, Bama went into that game white flagging the run game. But because you had Jamison Williams, John Mechie in that game at least being healthy, Bryce Young was able to take advantage, and that was it. That was all. That was the difference in that game. And so if Georgia's pass rush doesn't continuously affect C.J. Stroud the way that Michigan's was able to, for example, and what kind of adjustments have Ohio State made? If they don't, there could be more plays to be made in that secondary than I think some Georgia fans may be comfortable with accepting.
There's two matchups I'm watching out for in this ball game. Number one is an individual matchup between the best wide receiver for Ohio State, Marvin Harrison Jr., going against the best corner for UGA, Kelee Ringo. Two outstanding players. Number one, I'm biased, so I love seeing a secondary wide receiver-like matchup. But secondly, outside of that, both guys will be highly drafted players because they're overly talented, and they have to be able to trickle their energy throughout their entire unit. When you talk about Marvin Harrison, it's imperative for him to make plays, to be the lead singer for that wide receiver core there for Ohio State. And the same can be said for Kelee Ringo and what he means to the secondary play. So I'm looking at that individual matchup. And the last matchup that I'm watching out for, the pass rush for Ohio State going against Stetson Bennett. One thing that we know about Stetson Bennett, if you allow him to be as comfortable as a baby in a bassinet, he's going to rip your defense apart. Can they put pressure on him? Can they make him feel uncomfortable in the pocket? Because if they don't do that, Stetson Bennett will be delivering mail all night long come Saturday night.
Rocking the baby there. I see where you're going there, B-Mac. How about your keys here for both sides in the victory come Saturday?
B-Mac, I got to think about Ohio State here. And really it's a two-parter. So they've really got to find a way to at least limit the production in the passing game at tight end. But before I even talk about that, I really think about how they stack up against the run. Because you see, I think going into this game, there is a prerequisite for Georgia. Before we get into any matchups or any keys, they got to test your mettle physically. And if you can't stand up physically, it's not Picasso. It's paint by numbers at that point. It's academic. And so that's the first thing. Now, if you do stand up against them, part two is I want to know what that yards per carry number looks like for Georgia around halftime because 6 and 3 is a big difference. 3 means you're putting it in Bennett's hands to win the game. And I know that we've seen him do that a time or 3 lately. That doesn't mean it still isn't your best shot to win. And so you put him in third and longs. I think Jim Knowles is comfortable taking his chance, especially if they don't stack all 11 3 yards from the line of scrimmage like they did against Michigan.
I like how you're thinking, Josh. I agree with you also. For my keys in regards to Ohio State, smart sound football on both sides of the ball. When you look at what happened against Michigan, turnovers offensively for Ohio State paved the way for Michigan to be able to run away with that ball game. Yeah. If they have turnovers against this defense and giving Stetson Bennett and his crew extra possessions, good luck. It's going to get ugly. And then when you transition to Georgia, you talked about the physical nature in which they displayed the entire year. Can they dominate in the trenches? Can they dominate offensively, being able to run the football effectively? Can they dominate defensively and neutralizing and making the Buckeyes offense become one-dimensional? Those are the keys for me, because I believe, knowing and seeing how Georgia loves to play football, if they can take the fight out of you in the trenches, they're going to run away.
I'm hearing a lot of good things for Georgia and a few things for Ohio State as well. So I have to get your pick here, Josh and B-Mac. I'm curious which way you're leaning. Are we going back with UGA getting back to a natty, or Ohio State maybe getting a little redemption after what we saw in that game in November? Josh, what you got?
As much as I sound optimistic about Georgia, this was very close for me. And the reason it's very close is because I do agree there are a ton of edges in favor of the Bulldogs. I thought that way last year when they played Bama. There were one or two glaring mismatches that they were able to take advantage of. If that's there with a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., B-Mac, you know as well as I do, that's all it takes, man. If you can't control a guy in the secondary, that's all it takes to turn a game. Having said that, the big game identity that Georgia has proven is something Ohio State's still searching for under Ryan Day. And if I'm going to be proven wrong here, I'm going to make Ohio State prove me wrong, and I'm going to make them beat Georgia in this building, which hardly anyone outside of that Bama team's been able to do. So I'm going to take Georgia. I do think it's going to be a very competitive matchup.
Listen, I've been back and forth like you have been as well. I've been looking for ways to find a way for you guys to put money on Ohio State. I've been talking to myself like, B-Mac, let's throw something on Ohio State. But then I came to the realization, I won't do that. Give me the most consistent team. Give me the best coached team. Give me the team that has more pros than the opposing team. That's hard to say because we know how many pros Ohio State's they have on both sides of the football. But UGA, they got a little more. And those guys play like pros week in and week out. So I'm willing to lay the 6.5. I think a 7-point lead is doable for your UGA. And I can tell you this much. If Ohio State, if they're not careful, this thing can get ugly in the first half, especially in the Dome. They love the Dome.
If that happens now, I would know we don't have time to go down this because it would be an hour-long road, but if that happens, some of the most uncomfortable conversation you've ever seen in college football at the highest level will be had about Ryan Day.
Fellas, as always, breaking it down. Nobody better. Josh Pate and Bryant McFadden there in Atlanta as we get ready for Georgia and Ohio State. Can't wait to see that tomorrow. Appreciate it, fellas. Don't forget, you can catch out the late kick there with our own Josh Pate every day, well, Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. live on YouTube and Facebook. Check it out, of course. Everything bowl season, transfer portal. Josh always has it covered. Just download and check them out.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.